Welcome to Hidden Highways. My name is John, and I shall be your guide on this journey of epic proportions. Well, I don't know if that's true, but at least it'll be something. Something to do to waste a little time. So, I've never actually slept a night in a van in my life. Well, actually, no, I guess I did do it one time when doing a little bit of camping. But anyway, I'm kind of just, and I don't know if I'd ever live in it, but I'm thinking of at least trying it out because the idea interests me now that I have a job where I can do from the road. So right now you can just kind of say I'm van curious. But the thing that fascinated me about doing this was just the nature of this country itself, and really my love for maps. Now that sounds kind of stupid looking at maps. You can learn a lot, but the thing about maps is it does help you visualize a lot of things that you just wouldn't know by just if you didn't like maps. In fact, a lot of times I feel like I've never gone to a place if I haven't actually seen a map of it too. So let's just start with something that seems really stupid, but I think interesting, is the precipitation map of the United States. So basically you can see it goes from red, which is super dry, the Mojave Desert, to like purple, which is the Pacific Northwest, up there where it really rains a lot. And then you have, and even pink's even more rain. And then green is pretty good, which is pretty much the whole eastern. And then yellow's kind of okay, but you can just see the nature of the U.S. So the east part is basically all pretty wet. It gets all this moisture from the Gulf and stuff, and it just rains a lot. There's lots of trees and so forth and everything for the most part. And then when you start going, even when you get to a little into Kansas, the amount of rain drops a lot right here, and then it drops even less by the time that you get into Colorado. By the time you get here, it's pretty much, really, even before you get to the Rockies, it's pretty much looking like the desert. In fact, I've even seen, I think, some cactuses in part of Kansas. And then, of course, you have like Texas. It starts really wet over here, like near Shreveport and Shreveport, Louisiana goes east. And then you have here, and then you just have this thin little area along the coast here where it really rains a lot. And then you have here this area here. So what happens is the air tries to go across over these hills, right? And then, and actually, you can see here, because there's this big thing of mountains right along the coast here, okay, right along Washington here, and you can just see how it's green on this side of the mountains, and then it's brown on this side of the mountains. That's the desert. One side of the mountain is green, one side is the desert. And then you can just see right here, you can even look at the coast here. Here's some wind maps. You can see here how the wind kind of flows around the mountains here in Olympia National Park, and they also kind of flow around like Mount Rainier. And you can just see them go over the mountain, and they're just like losing all their moistures are passing over there. It's just, there's always rain. There's just a tremendous amount of snow right along here on the different volcanoes like Mount Hood and Mount Rainier and the mountain on Crater Lake. It's just, you get all that snow up there because just all this super moist air off the coast, it rises and it just gets this part really wet. And then after that, it's just dry air. And then once you get past here, you do have some green parts where maybe it hits another mountain range and it rains a little more and stuff. But this is just a total barren area here, which is kind of interesting, though. The desert where it's barren, nothing lives, but that's actually a good thing. Because of that, that's actually land that's worthless enough that people don't want to live there. And so because of that, there's a lot of federally owned land out there. There's all this BLM land, federal land, because basically the states, I guess, didn't want to take care of it or something. They just turned it over and the federal government just manages these lands. And then, so you get all these places you can camp. Now, it kind of sucks if you're into like something like sailing like me, because you don't need to be near a lake or something. But still, if you want to go someplace where you're not going to see anybody, where you can just kind of camp and be out in the woods and so forth, I mean, it's great for that. And then, and plus a lot of these areas do stay pretty warm in the winter too, so it's a good place for that too. And so you see a few scattered areas here, like the Appalachian Mountains, some forests here. Here's some forests in the Ozark Mountains, and here's some forests here up in the northern Minnesota, Wisconsin, this sort of thing. But really, the bulk of all this federal land is here along this area, which is, as we can see too, and there's lots of different mountains and valleys and all that sort of thing. Once you get here, this whole big part of the United States this part's pretty dry, and it's just like this flat grasslands, the plains, and then it gets wetter as you go on here, but it's still a lot of this is pretty flat. You got the Ozarks down here, but just it's interesting the entire way that this landscape is set up. You know how that. One good thing about going to the desert where it doesn't rain a lot is if you want to use a swamp cooler, they work very well because when water evaporates, it really absorbs the heat and it cools down. It's actually the dry air. It's kind of a magical thing. Water becomes kind of a magical thing when you're in a desert, because if you pour it on your hand, it actually feels kind of like almost like you're pouring rubbing alcohol on it because it evaporates so fast. And because you'll be surprised if you get like your shirt completely wet, then it'll be dry in no time. But so that means that in the desert it has the magical ability to absorb a lot of heat. And so you can actually, that's why as long as you have a good supply of water, you can actually very easily just with a small motor blowing water through a fan, or moisture through a fan, you can actually get it to cool a lot. And so we have our rain map. And then if you also look at the United States, the interesting thing is now, this is something they made called the racial dot map, but actually I'll just do it where they had a dot representing every race. Like you can see like this part, there's lots of African American people, and then you can see other areas like along here, and then you see Asians. But actually if you just remove the color, just look at the population instead, okay, that's better. You can see just look how densely populated this East Coast is compared to, and then you have this area here, and then a few little streaks here, but this is just, then you get out here, it's just totally empty land. I mean, it's so amazing how everything is grouped like that, and you can just see that. You can see the different cities here. And one change that will occur across the nation that you can observe when you're traveling about is how dark the skies are. Now here's a map here that somebody made, and by the way, all the maps I'm showing the links are up there, so I guess I'm properly citing these people or whatever. But anyway, I think it's considered fair use using all these. So basically, you can see the green and the red and all that. These colors, this is the worst. Okay, if it's white, that means you could practically see no stars. The skies are so bright with pollution. Then it gets a little better. Then you get to like green, it's a little better. Then blue, and then if you get to some of these areas like up here, this darker gray, that's about as dark as you can get. Even in the middle of the ocean, it's still about that dark. So you can see the areas like these are bands where it's really dark, where you can really see a lot of stars. You can see this. Look at this. Look at all this area. These are all the areas where the skies are so bright you could practically not see a single star in some of these areas, like the Bay Area. You'd be lucky to see like 1 or 2 stars in that whole thing. And then that people don't realize that we used to be able to see the stars a lot. Now you don't even see it in some of these areas. But then once you get out here in the desert, it's usually pretty good. And then up northern Minnesota, not too far from where I live, it's really dark up there. And then that's a really interesting thing. You can look at these maps. In fact, all these maps could be interesting things to look at. You go along the way and say, hey, where am I going to find some really dark skies? Where am I going to find like different weird wind patterns? Where am I going to see all these mountains? Where am I going to be in the areas that are really dry? Like I remember a long time ago, like I'm originally from St. Louis, Missouri. I took this trip out west, and I just thought it was interesting just seeing gradually the trees just getting smaller to where in Oklahoma there's basically not many trees. Then you start getting these weird kind of hills that are kind of blown away, these weird shaped hills from the wind. Then you get all these going roughly along what was the old Route 66. Then you just get to see like some of these like big mesas, and it's just you just don't see a lot of that stuff in kind of like nondescript middle of America. A lot of that just looks a lot different. But it's also for those people. But although at that time I really I was thinking the desert was really neat. But why I was just like, oh man, I can't wait to see a tree. And then I was happy to get back home and to see a bunch of oak trees too. So I mean it's because the desert or whatever, or the woods, I mean the wetlands of America, the Great Lakes, the oceans, I mean it all has this different character. And it's all that thing that you can explore when you're in your van. You can go around these places and just see what it's like, maybe even look at what the people are like. This might be a little harder thing to see, but there was this guy named Calvin Woodard. Okay, he came up with this theory of dividing America into all these different zones. He's calling them like Yankeedom, the Midlands, New Netherlands, Tidewater, Greater Appalachia, Deep South. He had it all down to like about a county level here too, color coded, where he says that you can kind of divide America into these different sections, and pretty much you have a good idea of what the people are like in each one of these sections. Each one is kind of like its own nation, in a way, in their attitudes. As we've seen, like, America has become really polarized with like the red states and blue states. Well, it's a lot deeper than that. It actually goes down to these regions. And so basically, let's just say, to keep it simple, you started out with these group of Puritans. They had a certain attitude about the way things should be, and they're big on like government and like participation in local assemblies and these sort of things. And then they were able, people from those mostly settled these states, and they kind of took this attitude. Then you had the Midlands, which was basically the Quakers, and they kind of settled, descendants from them kind of settled each one of those states. And then they had Greater Appalachia, which is mostly Scotch-Irish, which was a really interesting group because they were much more like a wilder group, because they were from the borderlands in Scotland where there's always wars going on. So they had a whole tradition of vigilante justice, and they kind of went and settled a lot of these areas. They started in the Appalachian Mountains, Appalachian culture, but he has Greater Appalachia going all the way to Texas here. And then you have the Deep South, which is really different from Greater Appalachia, because it's more like a aristocratic society that was based on slavery originally, and it still has some of that attitude, still left today. And I don't know, going on these hidden highways, so these are all like little hidden highways, these different migration paths of these different people, and in some ways their mark is still left on us. Like there's an area here in Ohio called the Western Reserve that's supposed to be, and I'll have to check this out sometime, it's supposed to actually have a lot of New England architecture, because originally it was part of Connecticut, because what it was is Connecticut, somehow they owned this land, they claimed this land, and then they sent some of their settlers there, and they made it to look like New England. And so it has a New England feel to it that's much different from the rest of Ohio, because then you get to Ohio, then down here Greater Appalachia. So there's really 3 Ohios. And then where I'm from, the St. Louis area, they showed how you have St. Louis is what he considers part of the Midlands, but once you get right outside, he considers it Greater Appalachian. You can almost see that in the attitudes there. In fact, it's kind of interesting if you just go just outside of St. Louis. It seems like the accents all of a sudden kind of change real quickly, like they come like a lot more southern. It's kind of interesting, how that works out. So, but you can dissect America in a lot of different ways and look at these different kind of hidden highways and these different like pathways, and just the different history. That's something I'd like to explore a lot, is a lot of the history, and meet some of the people and see what they're all about, and just the differences of the people. And then the left coast, that's an interesting thing, because they were an interesting mix, because what you had is you had one group from New England that wanted to settle it, make it like a Puritan type colony over here, but then you had going overland, you had more like people from Greater Appalachia that were coming there, that came overland. These are people that didn't have as much money as the people who came by ship, and they kind of mixed to make kind of a hybrid between the Yankeedom and the Greater Appalachia ideas of anyway. So hopefully this will be an interesting adventure. It's probably not going to happen till about October, I think, but I am going to go on some other trip earlier this year. Actually, my dad's RV, he's got a real nice one. I'm just been fixing up a minivan, my stealth van, to do that. So my stealth camper, but maybe I'll do some of those, and maybe just have some other general interests. And anyway, welcome to Hidden Highways. And my name is John. Talk to you later.